Greetings and welcome to the latest episode of Engineering Education, The Future is Now. ASME's four-part series of conversations where we examine challenges to building the engineering workforce in the post-pandemic era. Today's topic is the class of COVID-19, how new graduates can make a great impression. I'm Jeffrey Winters, editor-in-chief of Mechanical Engineering Magazine. And I'm joined by two experts on what it takes for students to successfully transition from college to careers. Mr Feinstein is a pioneer in the online recruiting industry and author of the recent book, Launched, Start Your Career Right After College, Even During a Pandemic. And by Michael Powell, director of the Engineering Career Assistance Center at the University of Texas in Austin. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just as an introduction, in recent years, employers have looked for much of the same things from newly minted engineering graduates: good grades, solid internships, and impressive interview skills. But the pandemic has made it harder to assess the classes of 2020 and 2021. Classes have gone from lectures and labs to online courses taken via computer, and in many cases, off campus entirely. Internships have been sharply curtailed as businesses have moved to remote work or have been extremely cautious about who enters the office. And with travel opportunities limited, the old-fashioned job interview has been replaced by a Zoom call. Even so, engineering students are graduating and companies are hiring. This webinar will focus on how employers are selecting among new graduates and what skills these new engineers need to help them stand out from the pack. Before I begin, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors, without which this conversation could not have taken place. You can get more information about them on the resource section of the console, and please check that out when you get a chance. So, Mr. Feinstein, Mr. Powell, let's dig in. Michael, let's start with you. Can you tell us what's been going on at the University of Texas in particular, and more generally with engineering schools across the country, in regards to classes for juniors and seniors? I know from personal experience, my son is an engineering student at Stony Brook University here in New York, that all of his classes have been remote for the past year. Is that what you're seeing?
That is correct. Over this past year, since March of 2020, classes were moved online. Instruction largely moved online, mostly in real time, but also asynchronous. Labs, a lot of those have also moved to an online environment, though there are some cases where under the right circumstances, labs can still meet in person as long as they are meeting the requirements for proper distancing and proper safety. That's very similar to what we're seeing in other schools. There are some schools that have probably done a little bit more in terms of hybrid education or hybrid classroom settings. We've tried some of that at UT. Other schools that I've talked to have also had either an online environment or some kind of hybrid where there may be some teaching in a physical space.
Okay. And just as a quick follow-up, do you know what's been going on with extracurricular campus projects such as Formula SAE or the Human Powered Vehicle Challenges? In the past, those things have been a great way to build resumes. Or have those just been put on hiatus?
I don't know all the details, but the student organizations have still been meeting. A lot of different student organizations. At UT, we have over 80 engineering student organizations of various kinds, ones that are very familiar like ASME, and then others that are more specialized or specific. And most of those have still been meeting, largely in an online environment. Those that are more project-based have been working with the school and with the university to try to safely engage in doing things in person as it permits.
Okay. Mr. Feinstein, I know that you speak with a ton of students and recent graduates from all over the country. Before I get into some other aspects of the pandemic era, what have you been hearing? And specifically, do you have a sense of how the pandemic has been affecting things like internships for undergraduates?
Well, look, it's a big set of changes, as we all know. Last summer, about half of the internships, according to Glassdoor, that were planned for summer 2020 went away. And the overwhelming majority of those that remained were turned virtual. It's not yet clear what the rebound, if any, might look like for summer of 2021, but I think we can all expect and plan on more of the same, as is going on in the world at large, mostly remote, maybe some spotty opportunities to have some in-person activity, but certainly not at all a return to normal. So there's been a lot of adjusting that has happened on both sides, among students and among employers alike, and it's changed the way that people think about the recruiting process and the internship experience. If anything, the recruiters now have a year of experience, and a lot of students are encountering this for the first time, depending on their time in school. So those students entering an internship market for the first time will be seeing some new things, and some adjustment is required.
The closing of campuses to in-person learning and the restriction on internships seems like it would put a crimp on the usual ways that engineering students prepare for entering the workforce. What have you heard from students and employers about the job search in the year 2020, 2021, and both the job search and recruiting at this moment?
Yeah, well, it's there's some adjustment, as I say, that's required. Certain experiences that students used to be able to acquire more easily aren't available for the reasons that we've been talking about already. It really requires that a lot of tactics that have always been around just need to be more sharpened in an environment like this. What are, short of an in-office or hands-on experience in a normal work setting, if you will, need to be replaced by a greater emphasis on understanding what transferable skills a student has acquired, what types of projects in classroom or in even remotely academically oriented projects will now need to be talked about in place of what used to be talked about as a normal summer internship experience, and even activities and things like clubs and other non-work experiences. Those offer opportunities for skills that can be highlighted in resumes and in interviews around leadership, team building, the sort of soft skills that employers are looking for. So there's a reorientation that needs to take place there to have points of emphasis to craft one's pitch, if you will, in the job search process.
Is there like a specific example of one of these substitutes for traditional credentials that you could point to, like some online project that about from one of the people you've worked with that has helped give them an edge?
Well, I'll give you an example that seems even a little bit more far afield than what you're suggesting. In my book, I talk about one recruiter for one of the major Big Four accounting firms. Now, I know we're not talking about accounting here, but still, this is a guy who you would think most of the time is looking for some hard skills, accounting skills, some type of certifications, etc. He loves to see, for example, RAs, resident assistants, the folks on your dorm floor. Why? Well, because that is experience in his mind that speaks to leadership, dispute resolution, team building, and things that are valued in a workplace that a student, even those who might have been a 2 or 3 year RA, wouldn't really be thinking of. So it's an example of how to think about one's background from the recruiter's eye for what they might be looking for. In terms of projects, I don't have a specific example there, but I would think of it this way: in normal times, in an internship experience, we're looking for takeaways to display specific skills. Yes, I had this job, and yes, I worked on this project, but my takeaway in those days was, what did I learn? What skills did I develop? And what insights into my career did I get from that experience? Similarly, classroom projects have the exact same characteristics, so they should be thought of in the same way.
Mr. Powell, I mean, you work with employers, work with students. Are employers taking these weird circumstances into account when assessing new graduates, or do students need to find ways to, somehow, try to build up traditional, style credentials regardless of the pandemic? I mean, Mr. Feinstein talked about some of these online projects. Are employers still, in your experience, looking for something that is a closer approximation to the traditional credentials?
It's a bit of both. Certainly, to answer your first question, employers are well aware of what everybody's going through, and by and large, in recruiting, they've made a lot of allowances for what they know students are going through and having to adapt to with this kind of environment. On the other hand, employers still have needs. And the way I tell that to students is I always tell them that there are 3 questions that employers, at the end of the day, want answers to. And everything that they're looking at in your resume, every question they ask you as a student, is designed to answer those 3 questions. And those 3 questions are, do you have the skills and experience to do this job? Second, do you have the interest and passion to do this job? And then third, do you have the personality or attitude to do it the way we need it done? And that's what it all comes down to. So if it's about skills and experience, employers are allowing for the fact that students may have had an internship last year that was rescinded due to COVID. And they're allowing for that and not expecting, that the students necessarily would have had an internship, but they're still looking for, do you have the technical skills and the transferable skills that we need you to have? So students who are proactive, who maybe did a project on their own, or maybe did a project through a student organization, or even got volunteer experience of some kind, or, took additional classes that may have allowed them to develop. Those are going to be ways that students can still show that they made an effort to get the skills that they need, in addition to showing their interest and their attitude towards the job, and that's going to make them more attractive to employers.
Just to take a quick detour, with students being so much off campus, how has this affected the way that you operate the Career Center at the University of Texas at Austin?
Yeah, when we were moved off campus in middle of March last year, luckily we had some warning that this was going to happen because other schools had already started doing the same thing. So by the time we moved off campus, we were prepared to go to an environment that was largely like this one, Zoom. And we created a Zoom lobby for students to be able to come into anytime they wanted to during a normal time, just like they would come into our office normally, and be able to talk to staff to answer questions that they might have in the moment, or be able to then talk one-on-one with a counselor, just as they normally would, only in this kind of environment instead of physical. So we were able to adapt there, and we started working with employers to also adapt their interview schedules, their information sessions, and then of course even career fairs and other events started immediately working to put those on the best virtual platforms that we could think to have in those environments. And by and large, I think everybody adapted rather well, starting with my staff adapting to that kind of environment of interacting with students and employers. The employers had for a lot of them, they had a big learning curve of all the different platforms that are out there and all the different ways that they could engage in a virtual environment. They caught up well, and then students, being who they are, they also adapted to that environment, and so it's that part has been as smooth as it can be. It's never a substitute in my mind for the physical interaction and being in that space together. But everybody has adapted to that environment. And so we've had a lot of events and interactions go on in that space.
Right. And I guess for you, Mr. Feinstein, you were prepared to promote a book on a book tour, and you deal with students as clients. I guess this has affected your the way that you work as well.
Certainly. It's a Zoom, WebEx, Google Meet world, and we're all adjusting to it. So there have been I've had some socially distanced gatherings that were related to my book, and an awful lot of WebEx interactions. The entirety of my book research was done during COVID time. Mm-hmm. It was as the title implies, especially during a pandemic. It was, yes. The news peg was to current times.
You both mentioned Zoom and other digital tools. As digital tools are becoming a bigger part of engineering, not just obviously communication tools, but sort of design tools and FEA and analysis. Is this something that engineering students should make a special effort to be adept at, given that many of the in-person experiences, as we've mentioned, that you would get either on campus or in internships have been curtailed? And secondly, I mean, are there ways to how can they help prove that they're competent in these applications that they've been doing? I mean, so I guess that's a two-part question. I don't know if anybody wants to jump into that, but I mean, basically, you work on software, it's a design tool or whatever. Other than, I mean, how do you help show that you're good at that?
I think it shows in a few ways. I mean, part of it is in the interview process itself, where being comfortable and being able to express oneself in a setting like these that many of us are very used to, some of us are getting used to, is an important skill. It's also important to note that that there's an evolving definition of what back to normal is going to look like overall. I think what one of the impacts of the pandemic is that it hit the fast forward button on what was already a move toward greater remote work. So, and certainly driven more by employees who have wanted to work remotely or have more flexible work schedules for quite some time. And generally speaking, employers who have been less comfortable with that type of working arrangement. The pandemic has jolted that dynamic into a much greater reality of remote work is a norm that most companies have, I would say, reacted to quite favorably in terms of overall productivity. So there are skills that have been developed during this time that need to be emphasized in interviews and resumes and just overall thinking about one's elevator pitch around a ability to be productive in a remote environment. And that's something that employers are now being a little more forward looking about, saying, hey, a lot of this is going to remain. A lot more flexible work schedules seem to work. In competitive markets, to be competitive, employers are going to need to continue to be more open to those types of relationships, to work settings. So being able to operate in Zoom for interviews, not just to do it mechanically, but to be comfortable and be able to communicate that way, and also to demonstrate an ability to work remotely, are things that employers are going to be even more keen on beyond the foreseeable future.
Mr. Powell, I mean, in terms of the digital portfolios, and what advice do you give to the students that come to you?
I guess the way I'm interpreting your question in terms of the digital environment for students is, I think, two parts. One, how they're going to be able to show off their technical skills, for example, but also just the digital platforms and sites that are out there and how to use those as part of their job search or as part of their career development. I think with the first one, going back to something that Rob said, a lot of that comes out in the interview process itself. And of course, a lot of many of our employers, as part of their process, have some combination of behavioral interviewing and technical interviewing. And of course, some things lend themselves naturally to a technical interview, such as programming skills. And there are, there are ways out there to test someone's programming ability or ability to use certain technical tools in that kind of environment through the interview process. Behavioral interviewing also tries to capture that, where students may be asked to, talk about times or give examples of how they've used a particular tool or how they've developed a particular technical skill. And those students who can communicate that and communicate the knowledge that they have are certainly going to benefit themselves. And then the other part of your question that I interpreted was that, also just using the digital environment. And that's been something that students have adapted to in terms of using this environment more for their own job search. And luckily, it's been a process that's been developing pre-COVID, but COVID did force to fast forward. For example, for years, we've been, telling students to leverage LinkedIn and places like that as a way of displaying their skills and of connecting with people. Students over the past year have seen kind of a new level of why that's important to be able to leverage that, as well as using platforms from Zoom, for example, all the way to the kinds of interviews that you have on things like HireVue, where some employers for years have been using that as a way of interviewing or as screening students initially. We're obviously seeing a lot more of that happening, and students are adapting, and we're trying to help them adapt by helping them practice for those kinds of interviews. In the old days, we would do mock interviews with students where it was in person. Now, when we do mock interviews, we can do it two different ways. We can do it through Zoom, which is going to help them with an actual interview that's happening now, and through certain practice platforms that allow them to simulate what a HireVue interview would look like, and therefore be able to prepare for that. So the students who are being proactive and talking to their career centers and talking to those kinds of experts who are aware of all the different platforms that are out there and the changes that are happening. The students who are being proactive in learning these technologies and utilizing them in helping their own career development and career planning, they're going to benefit.
Okay. That segues into the next thing I'd like to talk about, which is, in a year where we have been sort of like cut off from our colleagues, cut off from our classmates, it's been difficult to nurture some of the soft skills, not just, being able to use Zoom, but there are other sort of soft skills that are necessary to become good employees and show leadership. So are there some strategies that, in this remote era that could be used to help sort of nurture that and get more depth? And I'm especially thinking of the stereotypical engineering student who is sort of more, numbers oriented and perhaps less, interpersonally oriented. So are there ways to help sort of for someone like that to help, nurture these soft skills, gentlemen?
Well, I think in some ways, some of the more difficult potential interactions have been taken off the table, and that's an advantage. I mean, a lot of us are not comfortable walking into a meet and greet room filled with people, if we can remember what that was like, but anxiety producing for many of us, and working in the room, so to speak. There's an advantage for those of us who are uncomfortable in a setting like that, and that's been taken off the table. In its place, there are certain networking tactics which are easier or should be easier because they don't have the same type of social anxiety that it creates for some. Networking on LinkedIn is one, as you mentioned. One other way that I've heard is actually more accessible these days and should be pursued is that a lot of students in an internship setting, 100% remote, have found that it's actually easier to create one-on-one interactions with executives at the company simply by scheduling a 15 or 20-minute Zoom meeting at the end of the day. Now that may carry some of its own, oh, that makes me nervous as well. However, it's brief, it's one-on-one, and it's very beneficial for not only soft skill development, but executing it with a purpose of networking and learning. And as I say, a lot of students are finding it's actually easier to set up one-on-one interactions like that. And I found that to be a great strategy.
Mr. Powell?
It's definitely brought challenges to the students because, normally when students come to the university, most universities have a way of welcoming students in and introducing them to not only their classes and their departments, but also to extracurricular student organizations, and there are a lot of things like that going on that you can't completely capture in a virtual environment. And so we've had students, a lot of first-year students this past year who've had to be in this environment. Probably their biggest complaint is it's so hard to make friends, because you can't sit next to somebody in class and really get to know them when you're in Zoom class. And so that's definitely made it more difficult. But in a way, one of the key transferable skills that I think students are developing that employers have always known is critically important is their adaptability. Students have figured out ways to adapt to, okay, how am I going to make friends, or how am I going to engage through student organizations and gain leadership skills and communicate with people. And they are adapting to that through even finding environments on their own, finding different platforms for some of their meetings that allow them to still have, to still socialize or to still do projects together. And so they're still gaining those skills, but they're in different environments. And so the employers are also, I think, going to appreciate that adaptability as long as students can communicate it. But I think employers then will also have to make that adjustment to say, yeah, this isn't the traditional way that a student is gaining leadership skills or interpersonal skills or even flexibility and adaptability skills or problem solving skills. They're doing it in a different environment. And so they're going to be giving different examples. And so part of that challenge is, students who had a remote internship, can talk about the special challenges that they had and things that they did, in order to engage and still learn from that. And those are things that employers are going to find valuable.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned the going to campus and trying to find the ways to connect. I mentioned my son. He's a sophomore engineering student at Stony Brook. He actually decided in the fall that he wanted to move back on campus because he wanted to have some sort of interaction with real live students, even if all of his classes are taken via computer. And he's been able to find some, and I think there is such a value to being on campus and trying to find a way to simulate that in some ways. I think students are, at least from his experience, they seem to be finding ways to get around the restrictions that are being put in place because of the pandemic. One other thing about my student, obviously he's a sophomore. He's had his expected college path thrown off. In terms of catching up to be career ready by the spring of 2023, what things should he and of course the countless other thousands and hundreds of thousands of undergraduates pay special attention to over the next 2 years? Let's imagine that things are closer to normal by the fall. What sort of things should he be thinking about and other undergraduates be thinking about in terms of catching up?
Well, I think that there's a strategy for students at any stage. There's a strategy for new grads, for rising seniors, and there's and in some ways the strategies that your son should pursue are better positioned than some, because having a horizon that goes out to 23 does give some runway to get back to a degree of normalcy. I think the way that I put this to students is that college is about accumulating experiences in as varied a way as possible, and those of course relate to just growing up, but also in the context of career development, there are several things that that one can do to gain experiences, and they're the ones that are available still, but different in the ways we've described in terms of in-class projects, interaction with faculty, clubs, and the opportunity to gain new skills, put yourself in uncomfortable new situations, and learn acclimation skills. All of those things, while admittedly more challenging to find in a virtual environment, are still available with a degree of creativity and a degree of thoughtfulness, and just taking advantages of the programs that offices like Michael's have out there for creating those opportunities for experiences. So keep your eyes open, stay engaged, and for those like your son with some runway, just continue to press it as he has by putting himself near campus or on campus.
Mm-hmm.
It's more challenging and different, but recruiters are going to be wanting to understand how you adapted, not how you fell prey to the environment.
Mr. Powell, any advice for sophomores and freshmen who have seen their first year of school disrupted?
Again, I think with this coming summer, for example, employers have had some chance to adjust. And so there's going to be a returning to normal, whereas, there's going to be still remote internships, but more internships, I believe, than last summer taking place in person, as employers have made those adjustments. And so there's going to be some of that return to normalization and what students were expecting when they first got to college. So there's that. But one of the things that this has done is it's really, made us stop and think, and really kind of messed with our current thinking that we've had for some years in terms of how things work. And one of the things that students do, which is a very human thing, is we tend to externalize. So they come in thinking, okay, I need to get an internship because an internship will help me get skills and will help me figure out what I want to do. Or I need to do this thing and this activity, this event will give me the skills and the knowledge of what it is that I need to do career-wise. And there's kind of this expectation as students coming in, that's what I need to do to get there. So when that's disrupted, what that has forced students to do is to start thinking what I would say more proactively than reactively. Get an internship, react to the experience, and then figure out where I go from there. To more proactively be thinking, well, what do I want? What kind of skills do I think I need to develop? What do I want to develop? What kind of experiences do I want to have? Which kind of experiences are most critical and important to me? What are ways that I can learn more about developing my own skills? Because there are tools out there, obviously, to do that. But it's forcing students and forcing, I think, candidates in general to internalize a bit more and to be proactive and to say, okay, there are resources that I can use or I can find out about, but now how do I want to go about doing that? And the people who are proactively trying to learn, proactively trying to gain some experience, proactively trying to internalize that experience that they're having, so that they can, figure out what they want their next step to be. Those are the ones who are going to benefit the most. If students come in with the sort of reactive of, I'm going to look at a job board, I'm going to count on the internship experience to show me the way and show me the path, I don't think that's going to work very well going forward, even after we're past this.
Fair enough. And finally, I know, unlike my son, there are some seniors out there who are watching this and have to be freaked out about the prospect of entering the workforce under the current conditions. Is there anything that you gentlemen can tell them that might ease their anxiety?
Well, I think the opportunities are there. They're fewer. They may be harder to find. They may require a little more use of the uncomfortable tactics, if you will, like we talked about. We talked about networking, but the world is going on, is proceeding. The companies that, certainly larger companies that look to internships and new college or new grad hiring as a feeder to future middle management and above, they know that they need to continue to fill that pipeline. So I think look, being a senior and trying to figure out how your starting career is always has been anxiety producing since there were seniors and careers. So this is different, certainly, but the basics are there, and it's certainly possible to succeed. It creates more challenge to keep going and keep at it.
As far as graduating seniors, my daughter just graduated in December and has recently moved to another city to start her work, which is starting out remote, but will eventually move to in-person. Not exactly sure when, but obviously that will happen at some point. And she, like a lot of our other seniors, are making those adjustments. She's still going through a lot of the process of, moving to the place where the company is, working from home, learning to work from home like all of us have done, but also with the knowledge that she will be there in person. And so she's making, she's adapting to both of those kinds of environments and realizing what's ahead. But as Rob was saying, graduating seniors going off to their first professional job, there is a lot of anxiety because there's a lot of uncertainty with, well, where's my career path going, or where's this going to lead, or do I want to go to graduate school, or do I not want to go to graduate school? Is this the right career path for me? Is this the right job for me? And that doesn't go away, which is why career centers like ours welcome back alumni with questions and so forth, and why there are career experts out there and career coaches who are happy to help people along the line. So again, it's, sometimes with people, we just think that external thing, if I just get this job, okay, then I can settle. But the career planning process, career development is lifelong. And so the next step is just that, it's the next step. And then from there, you're going to learn things, you're going to experience things, and that's going to help with the next step of your career path. And if there's any questions or concerns about it, that's where career counselors and career coaches and people like that can help out. Otherwise, it's trusting the process that this is your career path. It's not just, I graduated school, now I'm in the professional world, I'm done. We're always thinking about our career development and always thinking about, is this what I still want to do, or do I want something new?
Okay, very good. Graduating seniors, don't be like me, although I had a great experience. I punted on all this and joined the Peace Corps. So
good for you.
It's a good experience, but it did not lead to a job after that. Thank you so much for both of you guys for sharing your experience and your thoughts today. I'd like to thank Rob Feinstein, the author of Launched, Start Your Career Right After College, Even During a Pandemic. Yep, there it is. Available it's on Amazon, but you also have your own website. It's robfeinstein.com.
Yes, my website is at robfeinstein.com. You can find my book on Amazon. Just type in Launched by Rob and you'll see it pop up.
Very good. And Michael Powell, who's the director of the Engineering Career Assistance Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And I'd again like to thank our sponsors for supporting today's conversation. Please check out their links. Let them know that you watched and enjoyed this. I encourage you in the audience to catch the other conversations in this series, which is available at webinar.net or on demand in the coming days. I think these will eventually appear on YouTube. And thank you all for tuning in. And any college students out there, I hope that this has been helpful for you. You're getting the skills you need today to eventually land the career that you want tomorrow. It's a bit of a hiccup for all of us, but you'll get there. I hope you join us for our next conversation, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks.